My sister slept with my boyfriend, got pregnant, and planned to seize my inheritance. But they didn't expect what I did next. I'm 24 now. But this whole mess began a couple of years ago. Back then, I was in a relationship with a guy I met in college. Let's call him Jake. We clicked right away. He was kind, thoughtful, and we had a lot in common. Everything seemed perfect, and I was head over heels for him. I honestly thought this was the guy I would marry one day. So, after about a year together, I decided it was time to introduce him to my family. Now, my family is pretty traditional. We come from a conservative background, and they have strong opinions about things like dating, marriage, and when it's appropriate to do what. To be honest, they weren't thrilled when they met Jake. It wasn't that they were rude to him, but I could tell they weren't exactly fond of him. They didn't say much, just gave me that look, the one that says, "Are you sure about this guy?" I brushed it off, thinking they'd come around eventually. But here's the thing, while my parents were lukewarm about him, my sisters loved him. Grace, who's 22, and Emma, who's 11, both got along with him really well. That made me happy because, family approval matters, even if it's just from my sisters. Grace especially seemed to enjoy his company. We even joked that she was trying to steal my boyfriend. Emma adored him too, but she was just a kid, so it didn't feel weird. Jake and I didn't live together. In my culture, that's a huge no-no unless you're married. We worked in different cities and would meet up when we could. I thought things were solid between us. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my boyfriend, and he seemed to get along with the people closest to me. What could go wrong, right? Well, about 3 months after Jake met my family, everything changed. I was over at his place for the weekend. It was just a regular day, nothing special. We grabbed some food, watched a movie, the usual. Jake went to take a shower, and his phone buzzed. Now, I'm not the type to go snooping through someone's phone. I really believe that if you trust someone, there's no need for that. But for some reason that day, something didn't sit right with me. His phone kept buzzing, and I don't know why, but I picked it up. Maybe part of me already knew something was off. Or maybe I was just curious. When I unlocked his phone, I saw a message from Grace. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she's my sister. But when I opened the chat, my heart stopped. The messages weren't just friendly. They were flirty, like, "Let's hook up," flirty. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My sister and my boyfriend? I started scrolling up through the conversation, and it just got worse. There were months of these messages, late-night chats, inside jokes that I didn't know about, and even plans to meet up behind my back. I felt sick. How long had this been going on? The person I trusted most in the world? And my own sister? My hands were shaking as I took screenshots of everything. I couldn't think straight, but I knew I needed proof. I sent the screenshots to myself, grabbed my stuff, and left his place without saying a word. I didn't even wait for him to get out of the shower. I didn't give him a chance to explain or lie to me. I just bolted. When I got home, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from Jake. He must have realized something was wrong when he saw that I'd left. I ignored everything. I couldn't even look at my phone without wanting to scream. Eventually, I sent the screenshots to our friend group's chat and blocked him. I didn't care about the fallout at that point. I was done. I had no patience for lies or betrayal. But what hit me the hardest was Grace. Jake's betrayal hurt like hell, but Grace, well, that was on another level of pain. She wasn't just my sister. We had grown up practically inseparable. Our parents were often absent, wrapped up in their own world. So Grace and I had always leaned on each other. We were only 2 years apart, and we'd always been there for each other. Or so I thought. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and flew straight home to confront her. I didn't care what kind of scene I was about to make. This was bigger than just a fight. It felt like my whole world was crashing down. When I walked into my parents' house, Grace was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I slammed the screenshots down in front of her. Our mom and dad were there too. Grace didn't venture to deny it. She just looked at the messages and shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. She actually said, "Yeah, I did it." So what? I wanted to scream. How could she act like this didn't matter? Like she hadn't just destroyed our relationship for good? My mom lost it. She slapped Grace across the face, something I had never seen her do before. My dad was furious too. yelling at Grace to get out of the house. He gave Hare a week to move out. I thought that was it. I thought maybe this was the end of all the drama. But then, 2 days later, Grace dropped another bombshell. She was pregnant with Jake's baby. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This had gone from bad to worse in a matter of days. My parents, who had been so angry with Grace, suddenly softened. They couldn't stay mad at her now that she was pregnant. Just like that, the whole dynamic shifted. It was like Grace was off the hook because she was having a baby. My parents started talking about how they couldn't abandon her now, how they had to support her no matter what she did. That's when I snapped. I told them exactly what I thought, how they were enabling her, how this was all messed up. They tried to tell me to calm down, that I was overreacting, but I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my stuff, told them to never contact me again, and left. The only one I didn't block was Emma. She's just a kid, and I didn't want to cut her off too. 2 weeks later, my mom somehow got a new number and sent me a wedding invitation. Jake and Grace were getting married, and my mom had the nerve to act like I should be there for family unity or whatever. I told her to get lost and blocked her again. That's how it all started. I thought the worst was behind me, but little did I know, the real mess was just beginning. After everything went down with Grace, Jake, and my parents, I thought cutting them off would finally give me some peace. I didn't expect things to go smoothly, but I figured maybe, just maybe, I could start moving forward with my life. I wasn't speaking to anyone except Emma at this point. I kept my distance, trying to focus on myself, my work, and just getting through the mess that was me life. But of course, with a family like mine, things never go quite that smoothly. About 2 months after I blocked everyone, I started hearing things through the grapevine. A cousin of mine, who I kept in touch with, mentioned that Grace was having a baby shower, and my parents were throwing it. Apparently, they invited a ton of people like it was some big celebration. At first, I wasn't surprised. I figured they'd make a big deal out of it, especially since Cethi were acting like Grace was some kind of victim. But then, my cousin told me something that made my blood boil. My mom had been going around telling people that I was the one who had abandoned the family, and Grace was the good daughter who was trying to keep everything together. Seriously? After everything Grace did, she was somehow the hero in this story? I was livid. I wanted to call my mom and tell her exactly what I thought, but I knew better than to get dragged back into that mess. So I kept quiet, tried to keep my head down, but inside I was fuming. The nerve they had to spin the whole thing around and make me look like the problem. A few days later, I got a text from Emma. She was just giving me an update on how things were going at home, but then she dropped something that really threw me off. Apparently, my mom had been telling people that I needed to get married soon, not for any real reason, just because she didn't want people gossiping about how Grace, the younger sister, was getting married and having a kid before me. What? I hadn't even spoken to them in months, and now they were worried about my reputation? It was absurd, but that's how my mom's mind worked. Everything was about appearances. She didn't care about how Grace had treated me. No, the bigger issue was how things looked to other people. I wasn't living me life on her timeline, and that was apparently a huge scandal. It made me furious, but more than that, it made me sad. It felt like nothing I ever did would be enough for them. Even when I cut them off, they still found a way to control the narrative and make me look like a bad guy. Then, Grace's wedding happened. I obviously didn't go, but I heard all about it from my cousin. Apparently, it was this huge fancy thing. My parents went all out, even though Grace was only a few months pregnant. They tried to cover up the whole scandal by telling everyone they were just being responsible and getting married quickly, so the baby wouldn't be born out of wedlock. My cousin also told me that my parents were telling people I didn't show up because of work commitments. Yeah, right. But you know what really hit me hard? It wasn't just that they were lying to cover up their own embarrassment. It was that they were still pretending everything was fine. They couldn't just admit that their family was falling apart. Instead, they had to put on this fake show for everyone else. At that point, I was done with them. I didn't want anything to do with their lies or their facade, but still, hearing about it all felt like a punch in the gut. It was like they were erasing me from the family narrative completely. Time passed, and I tried to move on. I threw myself into work, and focused on building a life for myself. For a while, things were quiet. I wasn't hearing much from my family, and I figured maybe they had finally given up on trying to manipulate me. But, of course, that wasn't the case. One night, I got a call from Emma. It was late, and I was about to go to bed, but something about the way the phone rang gave me a bad feeling. When I picked up, Emma was crying. She could barely get the words out, but eventually, she told me that our dad had passed away. I was stunned. I mean, I didn't have the best relationship with him, but still, he was my dad. What really pissed me off, though, was that it was Emma who had to call me. My mom didn't even bother to pick up the phone. I hadn't heard a word from her. Emma told me that our dad had been sick for a while, but they hadn't told me. My mom had decided to keep it from me because she didn't want to stress me out. Can you believe that? My own father was sick, and they didn't think I had the right to know. The next morning, I booked a flight home. I didn't care about all the drama anymore. I just wanted to be there for Emma. When I showed up at my parents' house, it felt like walking into a battlefield. My mom and Grace were there, and the first thing they did when they saw me was start yelling at me. They accused me of only coming back for the money like that was the only reason I'd want to be there. Grace was especially nasty, calling me selfish and saying I abandoned them when they needed me most. I didn't even get the chance to grieve. Everyone was so focused on the inheritance, on who was getting what, that they barely even talked about Dad. It was disgusting. And then, as if things weren't bad enough, when they read the will, all hell broke loose. When the will was read, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Turns out, Dad had left me the largest share of his assets. I wasn't expecting anything from him, especially after how things had gone down with Grace and me parents. But there it was, in black and white. I was getting 40%, Emma got 30%. My mom got 20% and Grace? She got 10%. You'd think I'd feel relieved, right? Finally, some justice after everything I'd been through. But no, honestly, it just made things worse. Grace and her husband lost it. They started demanding that I give up my share. They said I didn't deserve it, that Grace needed the money more because of her baby. They even threatened to take me to court over it. I knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but the fact that they were willing to go that far just showed how greedy they were. It wasn't about family or what was right. They just wanted whatever they could get their hands on. I wasn't backing down, though. I told them I wasn't giving up a single cent, and that's when things got really ugly. Grace's husband started making threats, saying I'd regret it if they didn't do what they wanted. I knew it was all just talk, but still, it was unsettling. I was already grieving the loss of my dad, and now I had to deal with this mess too. It was all too much. After the will reading, I went back to my hotel to clear my head. I thought about everything that had happened, Jake's betrayal, Grace's lies, the threats, the greed, and I realized something. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I'd spent too long letting my family control my life, and it wasted time to stand up for myself. I wasn't just going to let them walk all over me. I was done being the punching bag. A few days later, I got a message from my lawyer, and we had another meeting scheduled to go over some more details about the estate. Honestly, at this point, I just wanted everything to be over. I was tired of the drama and just wanted to settle it so I could go back to my life. But when I got to the lawyer's office, he hit me with something I wasn't expecting. Turns out, my dad had written me a letter before he passed away, and the lawyer had been asked to give it to me when the time was right. I sat there for a minute, staring at the envelope. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to open it. I had so many mixed feelings about my dad. Sure, he left me the largest share in the will, but he never really stood up for me when everything went down with Grace. I was angry with him, but at the same time I missed him. So I opened the letter. It wasn't long, just a couple of paragraphs, but what he said hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. He apologized for not being there for me when I needed him. He said he knew he should have done more, but he felt trapped by the situation with my mom and Grace. He admitted he had regrets, especially about how things ended between us. Reading that letter, I didn't know whether to cry or be angry. Part of me felt a little closure, but another part of me was just pissed that he hadn't said any of this while he was alive. It was too little, too late. After reading the letter, the lawyer and I went over a few more things about the estate, but honestly, I was checked out. My mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about how different things might have been if my dad had just spoken up sooner. Maybe if he had stood up for me instead of staying silent, none of this would have happened. But of course, I couldn't change the past. On my way back to the hotel, I got a call from Emma. She was really upset because apparently Grace had been spreading some pretty nasty things about me around town. She was telling people that I was trying to steal the inheritance and that I was turning the family against her. I wasn't surprised, honestly. Grace always knew how to play the victim, make herself look like the innocent one. But hearing it from Emma still stung. It was like no matter what happened, Grace was always going to make herself look like the hero. When I got back to the hotel, I decided to take a break from the drama. I needed some time to just breathe. I picked up Emma and we went out for dinner. We talked about everything that had happened. I tried to reassure her that none of this was her fault. She was just caught in the middle of all of this, and I hated that she had to deal with it. But the next day, things took another turn for the worse. He woke up to a bunch of missed calls and texts from unknown numbers. At first, I thought it was just spam, but as I started reading the messages, I realized they were all threatening. They called me names and accused me of trying to tear the family apart. One person even said they were going to make me pay if I didn't back down. I had no idea who was behind it, but I had a feeling Grace's husband was involved. He had already threatened me once, and I wouldn't put it past him to try something like this. I forwarded everything to my lawyer just in case things escalated, but honestly, I was starting to feel like things were getting out of control. It wasn't just family drama anymore, it was threatening, and it was scary. Later that afternoon, I went to my car, only to find that someone had slashed all 4 of my tires. I was completely freaked out at that point. Who would do something like that? I knew Grace and her husband were angry, but this felt extreme. It felt like they were willing to go to any lengths to get what they wanted. I called the police and filed a report, but I didn't have much hope that they'd catch whoever did it. Still, I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. He was already dealing with enough, and the last thing I needed was to be scared every time I walked out the door. I talked to the hotel staff, and they beefed up security around the property, which made me feel a little better. But it was clear this wasn't going to end anytime soon. A few days later, we had another meeting with the lawyer to finalize some things with the estate. Grace and her husband were there, and the tension in their room was thick. They barely said a word to me, but their glares spoke volumes. At the end of the meeting, Grace's husband pulled me aside and told me I was making a huge mistake by not giving up my share. He said I'd regret it and that this wasn't over. I didn't even bother responding. I just walked away. I wasn't going to let him scare me into doing something I didn't want to do. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. Things didn't calm down after that last meeting with the lawyer. If anything, they got worse. Grace and her husband were getting more desperate, and honestly, it started to feel like I was in the middle of some bad movie. The threats kept coming, the nasty texts from random numbers didn't stop, and I was just mentally drained. One night, about a week after the tire slashing incident, I was heading back to my hotel after having dinner with Emma. She had been staying over with me for a few days, which was honestly a relief. It was nice to have someone on my side in all this mess. We were walking through a hotel lobby when I noticed a guy just standing there, watching us. At first, I thought he was just some random person waiting for someone, but when we passed by him, I noticed he followed us. I tried not to freak out, but the whole situation had me on edge. I couldn't help but feel like something wasn't right. We got into the elevator, and as soon as the doors closed, I looked at Emma. "Did you see that guy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, looking just as nervous as I felt. "Yeah, he was staring at us. I didn't like how close he was following us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We got to our room, and I immediately called the front desk to report the guy. They said they'd check the cameras and send someone up to patrol the floor, but honestly, it didn't make me feel much better. This whole thing was starting to get way too close for comfort. I couldn't shake the thought that Grace's husband might be behind it. I mean, who else would go to such lengths just to scare me? That night, I barely slept. Every little noise had me jumping out of bed, convinced that someone was trying to break in or worse. It was like living in a nightmare. All I could think about was how to make it stop. The next morning, I decided I needed to take some serious action. I called my lawyer and told him everything about the threats, the weird guy in the lobby, and the slashed tires. He agreed that things were getting out of hand and suggested we get a restraining order against Grace's husband. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but at that point, it felt like the only option. We filed the paperwork the next day, and I tried to keep my head down while we waited for the court date. But of course, Grace and her husband didn't take the news well. The texts ramped up again, this time with more threats about how I'd regret it and how they were going to make sure I paid for everything. It was exhausting, but I was done being scared. They could throw whatever they wanted at me, but I wasn't backing down. This was my life, my inheritance, and I was going to fight for what was mine. No one was going to control me anymore. A few days later, the court date for the restraining order came around. I showed up with my lawyer, and guess who else was there? Grace and her husband, of course. They looked smug, like they thought this whole thing was a joke. I avoided eye contact with them, focusing on what my lawyer was saying, but I could feel their eyes on me the whole time. When the judge called us up, Grace's husband tried to act like I was the one causing all the drama. Had claimed I was exaggerating everything, that I was just bitter about the inheritance and trying to make his life hell. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, really? He slashed my tires, sent me threats, and somehow I'm the one causing problems? Thankfully, the judges saw through his lies. After hearing both sides, the judge granted the restraining order, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now, there was something in place to protect me if things got worse. But, of course, things didn't magically get better overnight. The threats didn't stop right away, and I still felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. But at least now I had the law on my side, and that gave me some peace of mind. A few weeks passed, and I was finally starting to feel like maybe things were settling down. I was still staying in the hotel, but I had started looking for a new apartment, somewhere safer. Emma had gone back home and I missed her, but we kept in touch constantly. She was still dealing with the fallout from all the family drama, but at least she wasn't stuck in the middle of it as much as I was. Then, one morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a threat this time, it was a link. I hesitated for a second before clicking on it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Someone had created a whole website dedicated to trashing me. I couldn't believe it. I'm talking lies, half-truths, and just pure nastiness. They were painting me as this selfish, greedy person who was tearing the family apart. They even had photos of me from the funeral, making it look like I was cold and heartless. According to both captions, I was faking my grief. I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the link. He told me to screenshot everything, which I did. We started the process of getting the website taken down, but it felt like just another reminder that Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. That night, I talked to Emma again. She was upset about the website and wanted to help, but there wasn't much she could do. I didn't want her getting caught up in all of this any more than she already was. We talked for a while, and she told me about how Grace had been acting like nothing was wrong. Grace was acting like she hadn't just destroyed everything and made the family fall apart. Typical Grace, always playing the victim. I went to bed that night feeling drained, but at least I had a plan in place. The website would get taken down, the restraining order was in effect, and I had people on my side. I wasn't alone in this, even though it felt like I was sometimes. The next day, I woke up to an email from my lawyer. He said, website had been taken down. Finally, some good news. It felt like a small victory in this endless battle, but I'd take what I could get. Grace and her husband weren't going to give up easily, but at least now I had some control over the situation. As I sat in my hotel room that morning, sipping on my coffee and trying to wrap my head around everything that had happened, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, yes, but the fear that had been hanging over me for weeks had started to fade. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. They could try all they wanted to drag me down, but I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. So, here we are, at the final stretch. I thought maybe things would finally settle down after the court win and the website being taken down. But no, of course not. My family drama had other plans. Even though I knew Grace and her husband weren't going to back off that easily, I never could have predicted just how far they'd take it this time. It all started about 2 weeks after the court hearing. I was starting to feel a little more relaxed, like I could finally breathe again without constantly looking over my shoulder. I was even considering moving out of the hotel and into a more permanent apartment, something that felt safe. But then something weird happened. One morning, I got a package delivered to my hotel. It didn't have a return address, which should have been my first clue that something was off. I opened it up, and inside was an old, beat-up notebook. At first, I thought it was just junk, maybe a random person sent the wrong package or something. But then I opened it up, and that's when things got creepy. The entire notebook was filled with handwritten notes about me. I'm talking pages and pages of scribbled messages, all about my life, my family, and even things about my dad's will. Some of the notes were dates and times of where I'd been, who I'd been with, even places I'd gone with Emma. Someone had been keeping tabs on me, and it was all right there in front of me. I felt a chill go down my spine. Who would send me this? Was this some kind-of twisted intimidation tactic from Grace's husband? I mean, they'd already tried the threats, the vandalism, even the weird phone calls. But this felt different. It felt more personal, like someone was watching me, tracking my every move. I called my lawyer immediately and sent him photos of the notebook. He was just as freaked out as I was and told me to report it to the police, which it did. They took the notebook as evidence, but honestly, I wasn't holding my breath for anything to come of it. The police had their hands full with a million other things, and I didn't think they'd figure out who was behind this anytime soon. After that, I tried to keep a low profile. I stayed in my hotel room most of the time and only went out when I absolutely had to. Emma was still calling me regularly, and she was worried too. She had no idea who could be behind the notebook, but she suspected Grace's husband just like I did. Then, one evening, as I was heading back to my room after grabbing some food, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, the same guy from the hotel lobby weeks ago, the one who had been watching Emma and me. He was back. He was standing near the elevators, pretending to scroll through his phone, but he was definitely keeping an eye on me. My heart started to race, but I tried to play it cool. I walked past him, pretending like I didn't notice anything, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. Once I got into my room, I locked the door and immediately called hotel security. They said they checked the cameras and sent someone up to do a sweep off the floor, but honestly, I didn't feel safe there anymore. I called Emma that night and told her everything. She was scared, which made me even more anxious. I hated that she was caught up in all of this, that she had to deal with the fallout from Grace's mess. But I promised her I'd be careful, and we made a plan to meet up the next day to figure out what to do next. The following day, I met Emma at a cafe downtown, far away from the hotel. We sat there for a couple of hours talking about everything. She told me more about what had been going on with Grace at home, how Grace was acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just tried to take me to court over the will. It was infuriating, but not surprising. Then, Emma dropped something on me that I wasn't ready for. She said Grace's husband had been asking around about my whereabouts, trying to figure out where he was staying. That's when it hit me. The guy at the hotel, the notebook, all of it, they were keeping tabs on me, and they were probably planning something worse. I knew I couldn't stay at the hotel anymore. It wasn't safe. If Grace's husband had people watching me, it was only a matter of time before things escalated. So that night, I packed up my things and checked out of the hotel. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Emma, just in case. I booked a room at a different hotel in the other side of town, hoping that would throw them off for a while. The next couple of days were quiet. I didn't hear anything from Grace or her husband, and the weird texts and calls seemed to have stopped. But I wasn't letting my guard down. I knew better than that by now. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my lawyer. He had some news that completely caught me off guard. Grace's husband had been arrested. Apparently, he'd been caught trying to break into my old hotel room. I didn't know what he was planning to do, but whatever it was, he got busted before he could follow through. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that he was finally out of the picture, but anger that it had committed this. I mean, what kind of person goes that far just for some inheritance money? It was insane. The police told me they were investigating, and I'd probably have to go to court again to testify, but at least now I knew I was safe for the time being. After that, things finally started to calm down. The police kept me updated on the case, and my lawyer was confident that Grace's husband wouldn't be able to pull anything like this again, not with the charges he was facing. I moved into a new apartment a few weeks later, somewhere Grace and her husband didn't know about. I kept in touch with Emma, of course, but I made sure she didn't tell anyone where I was living. I wasn't taking any chances. It's been a few months now, and while I'd like to say everything is back to normal, I don't think it ever will be. There's still a part of me that's always on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if Grace or her husband will try something again. But for now, I'm just trying to move on with my life. I'm trying to rebuild after everything they put me through. Looking back, I can't believe how far this all went. It started with Grace betraying me with my boyfriend, and somehow it escalated into threats, court battles, and restraining orders. But through it all, I've learned something important. I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. And no matter what, I'm never letting anyone take advantage of me again.